Hello guys, Nigel here with you, Nigel's Modelling Bench, and this is now kind of part 2. I don't think this is ever going to be like a video build. It's just as I go through it, I find this is the Lancia I'm talking about, the Italeri 1/12 Lancia Delta HF Integrale 16 valve 1990, and I'm going to be building this as the Mickey Biasion car because then it'll go nicely with my 037 I just got from Model Factory Hero. The obvious one I've talked about before is the seats. These co-driver seats should be different. It should have a lower back. Pretty much the rest of the shape looks to be the same. It should come up a bit higher at the front here, but may have a solution for that. Watch this space. So what have I been doing? I've basically, right here, right now, I'm working on the Stuka. Today is the, what is it, the 30, I should know, 31st of January 2022, and I've been working on the Stuka. Just started making part 13, and I've been doing a little bit on this today, and I've had to go out and run some chores today, but I thought I'd just show you where we are with what I'm doing, and if you're building this kit you might want to do the same. So as I say with a lot of my builds, kind of going through the manual and looking for areas where you've got pieces going together that are in halves. Like here we've got the was that a swirl pot? Yeah, I think that's a swirl pot for the coolant system. And then here we've got the fuel filler going together. That's in 2 halves. Obviously the roll cage is all done. I'll show you that in a minute. The exhaust I need to glue together. I've got one part off and cleaned it all up. Diff casing, get all that glued up, get it all the seams dealt with. I've got a plan for the shock absorbers that you're going to love, because as you know I don't like this where they come up through the shock towers, and they actually come up through the shock towers in front of the actual where they should do, and then you put this C-clip on there. It's a bit like a bloody toy. I know people hate me saying that, but it is. So what I tend to do is have a little play around with this lot and completely change the design of that. It's also going to make it stronger. Engine halves, obviously they can go together. Gearbox halves, they can go together. Start to build up the turbo because you've got all those halves there. So start making that look nice. Here we've got the transfer case. This is where the power goes across to the right hand front wheel, and then the power take off at the back for the rear. We've got the intercooler here, that halves of that go together. We've got the air pipe going into the intercooler, that could go together. Looking around here, I haven't done it, but I could have glued those two together, so I should have done that. We've got another tank here. This is like a power steering tank, I think, so that could go together. Radiator halves can go together, and basically I think that's about it. Obviously shock absorbers and everything, but yeah, so start looking at getting assemblies together, and when you're going through your build and you come to need them, then you don't have to stop and wait for glue to try and deal with seams and all that. So here's the fuel filler. Now something I do want to say in this video, I think I said this in the review, or I may have been talking about another kit. When you see models with this silver grey plastic, this stuff here, if you see people doing reviews and they say, oh, detail looks ever so soft and it just, I don't know, it's not very good, it's silver plastic. That's what it does. Silver plastic makes everything look soft. Like you see this area here on the steering rack, it looks really, really soft. If you painted that in a primer, bang, it would pop. All that detail in that pulley there will really, really pop once it's got some paint on it. For some reason, silver paint doesn't do it. The silver plastic really seems to make everything just look soft and toy-like. Like this gearbox, which I've got clamped together here. You can see there's nothing very sharp about it. It's all soft and, you know, but as soon as that's painted, boom, and I'll show you that now. So you can see here the detail on there with the Jubilee clips around there, absolutely lovely. I've still got to do some seam work, but that's why it's primed. Just got everything primed, Mr. Surfacer 1000, and then we can check our seams. Here we've got that intake pipe. Again, we've got a seam all down there. We've got a seam all down there. It's quite prominent. It's at the top of the engine bay. So now there's got primer on there, we can see. But again, you can see that once you paint it, the detail really pops out and all the edges sharpen up and everything. Turbo here, looking very nice. Still got to do some more work around here. It's made in 2 halves, so need to build that up as well, because that would be around piping there. I use the cocktail stick. That area there, as you can see on the back, this area here, that should come around and be like a full circle when you look at it there. So that needs to be dealt with. I shall deal with that. The tanks, I've got the power steering and the swirl pots. You see they're all done, seams all dealt with. No caps on them yet because obviously we're painting them separately. But again, you can see on there the clamp around the outside, really nice. On here you've got all the details for the Goodrich hose fittings, all really nicely done, and the primers making them all pop. So that's all good. The wheel, I remember in the last video I remade the spare wheel and did all the drilling out and everything. I've given that a coat of white primer just to see how it looks, and as you can see, that's come out really nice. So really happy with that. So I'll give that a coat of LP2, is it? Yeah, I'll give that a coat of LP2, and that'll look great when it's all shiny. Then we can get the tyre on. Radiator glued together, gone round seams. It's doing a bit of seam work there, but you can see all around the edges, all nicely done. That's all going to be polished aluminium, I think. Engine halves are together and the sump is on. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I did a little bit of rework here just to sort of put a bit of an edge to make it look a bit more interesting. The sump pan, as you can see, as I say, the silver plastic ruins everything. When it's primed, you can see that is really nice. It looks like a steel pressing, doesn't it, guys? It's really sharp. It's really impressive. You know, it's lovely. Engine block is all nice. Got the cylinder head there separate. I'll scribe a line across there to demarcate the two. Engine block I think will be black or like a metallic grey colour. If you know, tell me in the comments. Front and back are machined faces, so they would be like steel if you're depicting a brand new car. Cylinder head obviously is going to be aluminium. It's going to be a very white coloured aluminium, so you know, go for that. But as I say, the sump is going to be bright gloss red, and that's going to really make it pop. And remember, the sump, the actual tin, it's like a tin pan, and it's got a rolled flange on it, so the red will be sort of halfway up that line. So if you really go to town, you could scribe a line around there where the gasket would go, and then you could put some black in there or something to show the gasket, or just whatever. There probably wouldn't be a gasket, it's probably silicone in there. And then we've got the rocker cover here, or cam cover should I say, all primed up, just checking for sink marks, flash and stuff like that. So that's all good. That's the air intake for the heater. That had a nasty seam down one side and there was a bit of mismatch between the parts, but that's all good. I've now got to deal with that. There's little cutouts in there on the insides, they got to be filled and dealt with. The rear diff, okay, seam on the back isn't very clever, but you can't really see it because it sits in a subframe. But seam down the side, there's missed a surface in here, that was all covered in sink marks, so that's all done. Then moving along from there, we have the alternator. Again, lovely, all nice and crisp. We'll have a black ring around the middle, so I'll probably spray it black, put some masking tape around it, and then spray the rest in a silvery aluminium sort of colour. Intercooler went together really nicely. Seams down the sides, we'll deal with that. But that's the bottom, so the top is not to be not worried about the top because it looks lovely from the top. And then we got the, I think this is the intake, the main air intake. So that comes in two halves, black plastic, bit of seam work to do in here, bit of seam work to do there. But you know, like I say, get them together now, leave them a few days, make sure they're all hard, and then deal with the seams and get them primed. And then when you need them, they're all good and you're not going to get covered in sink marks. And then the engine front cover is there. So see, again, all nice and sharply detailed. The engine is going to look stunning, I think, because we've got plug leads and all that to go on, and there's lots of detail bits. The fire extinguisher in the front, we've got the handheld fire extinguisher, and I've got this, the instructions say to paint the handle red. I couldn't find a picture of a Delta Integrale with the original Sparco, is it Sparco? Fire extinguisher in there. So it said to paint the handle red. I've painted the handle red, it'll add a bit of colour to the interior. But I've got this polished aluminium finish, something I've always struggled with, and what I did with this was LP2 gloss white. Okay, I've used lacquer paints because they're resistant to this. So Mr. Mark Fit Super Strong, it's not Mr. Mark Fit, it's Tamiya Mark Fit Super Strong, really makes the decals go down well, but it's very hot and it eats into most paints, but it doesn't seem to affect LP. So That is Tamiya LP2, and then LP, oh, which one is it? Is it LP38? LP38, nope, that's flat aluminium. Is it LP48? Oh, here we go. LP48, there we are, sparkling silver, and that's thinned like 60% Mr. Colour leveling thinners. 60% Mr. Colour leveling thinners to 40% paint, and then just literally fogged on very, very lightly. So what you're seeing there is actually the gloss white. You're actually seeing gloss white with just a smattering of silver on it. And that's, I think, it's given me that nice bright polished aluminium look. And then there's the two fixed fire extinguishers that go in the back. And I may add some plumbing into them because they'll look a bit lost on their own. And that is basically that, guys. Oh, gearbox. The gearbox and transfer case part, you're supposed to actually, what you're supposed to do here is glue the engine house together, glue the gearbox onto the back of the engine, and then add the transfer case. But there's a nasty seam around here that needs to be dealt with. So I wanted to get it all glued together and solid as one piece, and then I can paint it as one piece rather than deal with this seam on parts that are already painted with metallic paints. So what I did, you've got a great big tab on here that goes into the back of the engine block, and another little tab down there that goes into the back of the sump. So what I've done is cut them off so there's only like 1 millimetre exposed, and that way you can, with a bit of jiggery pokery, you can manipulate this and get it on, like just like so. Let's get it on. Singing again. Just like that, you can get it to go in. There we are. Okay, with those tabs cut off, and then it can easily be taken off to separate them for painting. All right, so that's my little suggestion there, is cut those tabs off so they're like 1 millimetre long, and then you can get it together and apart. That enables you to deal with that seam without having to deal with it after it's all painted and everything. You can paint it all in one, because I believe this whole casing here splits in half, and that is actually part of the diff cover. I don't think there's anything else bolting that. I think that's all one casting there, so we shall see. But I'll check my references. You're not going to see a lot of it anyway, but because it's tucked down the back of the engine. The engine is actually leant forward, which is daft. I don't know why they ever turn the engine around, other than to get the drive line. If the engine was leant back and the gearbox was like that, okay, if you're looking along the drive shaft now, basically if this is the front of the car, if you roll the engine forward, it actually lifts up the drive line. And they did that on the Group 5 Monte Carlo. They actually, in the standard car, the engine was leant back. In the Group 5 they lent it forward. I think they did that to get the drive line up, to get the drive shaft straighter. Otherwise, with the massive wheels, obviously pushes the centre line of the wheel up, and then you lower the car, which puts the centre line of the axle down. You end up with drive shafts coming out like this. So what you do is you tip the engine forward, and then that brings your drive line straight. So there we go. Body wise, this kit is a bit of a disaster. You can see here I've put Mr. Surfacer wherever there's a sink. Now there were sinks here, I've sanded them out. In fact, they need doing again, but there was a massive sink in here. Okay, there's a sink there and a sink there, all down the front of the doors here, bottom of the B pillar, all round the back here, just in front of the tail lights. That's going to have probably 3 or 4 lots. I could have used filler, but I don't like using it. There are ejector pin marks here on the inside that have affected the moulding. They've basically taken out the mould too quickly, I think. And then there's sink marks all down here, sink mark there under the door handle. Back here, I don't know if you can see it, there's a massive step. If you look at this side, it comes down, it's just smooth, it blends in. It just blends in, the rear quarter comes down, and then it just blends into the side panel how it should be. On this side, there's a great big step, and it's a mould seam, and that actually goes into there. So we're going to have a play with that. It looks like, yeah, here that line carries along with the top of the door edge. Okay, and on this side the mould line is higher up, so it looks like we'll get away with sanding away here to bring that in, but we're just going to have to play with it. But keeping that nice and straight is going to be a nightmare. Unfortunately, it's going to be all red. Where's the instructions gone? Where did the instructions go? There they are. Oh no, it's going to be, oh, it's even worse. There's going to be stripes going over it, so you'll get to hide it a touch, but you don't really want it wavering. You want it to be dead straight, so that's going to be a bit of a nightmare to sand out, but we'll get there. And as you know, I've done the work on the interior all around the back here, filled in all these great big holes. I said already, didn't I, about the 2 tabs for the fire extinguisher. Roll cage is obviously all built up, and I've gone round with Mr. Surfacer on all the weld joints and just sanded them out. I need another application of them so that when it's all painted it's all smooth. And as you know, I've cut the front of the cage off here. I put some more Mr. Surfacer around here to try and blend those in, and that is basically that for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this all painted up, hopefully get the floor all painted up, get that bulkhead glued in, and then we can start looking at getting it all together. But you could just see, I mean, when that goes in there, and you've got that bit of colour in there, you know, it's just, even now, it's just going to pop straight away. The interior, there you go, let's get it squared up, straight away it pops. You know, and this is all going to be painted silver. For this I'm going to use Mr. Surfacer 1500 black as a primer, just to check everything's nice and smooth. And then what I'm going to do is use LP70, yes, LP70, which is my latest favourite paint, gloss aluminium, wonderful stuff. Spray that in there, nice and light, very, very light coats, and then go over it afterwards with a clear lacquer. I think that's why a lot of car manufacturers went away from the white and went to a metallic. It's easy to spray a metallic car paint doesn't come out shiny. It's very, very dull if you've ever sprayed metallic car paint. And it's easy just to spray in there, and it can overlap and fog and everything. If you're going for like a white finish and it's a 2K white paint, you know, it's really difficult to get in all the nooks and crannies and not miss a bit. And if you do miss a bit, you can't go in there and just blow it in, because you end up with overspray either side. Keeping a wet edge all the time is always difficult. I'm talking about full size though, not models. But I've done a couple of caged bodies. I can tell you it's a bloody nightmare. And then you sort of finish, and then you realise that you're inside. You've done it all this way, and you haven't done that way, and you've got bare roof panel here showing. So you try and touch it in, it's a nightmare. So I think they've gone for this silver because it's easy to spray, and then you just go in there and just bang the lacquer into it. So there we are. So that's the boot is silver, underneath the hood is silver, the floor inside is silver, the floor underneath is silver, the whole thing is silver. Okay, so I've noticed there's a Model Factory Hero build of this on YouTube, the Car Modelling Tube. Go take a look. He's a wonderful guy, built some beautiful models, mainly Model Factory Hero stuff, and he's obviously following the manual, and they have got the floor painted black, and underneath here, this section here is painted white, but the rest of the floor is black. And I didn't think any of the Lancias had black interior, but it's very interesting because my Lancia 037 Model Factory Hero telling you to paint the chassis and everything black. That car, I'm 99.9% convinced, the 037, the whole thing was silver. Roll cage, interior, floor, all the framework at the back, all the framework at the front. I'm 99.9% sure it was all silver. So there we go. So anyway, that's that for now. I'll come back and do some more when I've done some more work on this body. Okay, so as you can see on the rear section of the floor, I've got some black primer down. I've been doing some rubbing. Obviously, like, there's some marks I can still see where the where I put those parts in. Another couple of points. You'll also see there's a white disc there, and there's a white disc there. These are basically great big holes. This is like 2.5mm, and this is where the exhaust goes in. And this is 2mm, this is where the prop shaft goes in, or the drive shaft if you're in America. And basically, I don't want to see holes with pins sticking through them. So what I've done, I've got the exhaust and the prop shaft here. I've basically cut the pins down in length. It's that one there and that one there. I've cut them down in length so they still go in, and then I've punched out a circle of plastic card and glued it in to make that a blind hole. And then once that's hard, I can trim that off with a knife. In fact, I may be able to do it now. I can trim that off. The glue's still soft, I think. Be careful I don't rip it out of the hole. But basically we can trim that off and then we can sand it and then we'll have no hole. Now this could be hidden by fire extinguishers or whatever, I'm not sure. But I think I've just dislodged it actually, it feels loose. Oh no. But basically what I don't want to do is see a hole. Here, this one here where the prop shaft goes, there is nothing covering it. So basically I'm just going to trim that off, just like so. And then we can come along with a sanding stick and sand it out. And then we can put a drop of Mr. Surfacer under to hide it. And then we won't see any holes. You may think I'm being a bit fussy, but it's just that these little tiny extra touches like this that sort of take your model, you know, better than the one next to you. You know what I mean? It's just simple little things that don't cost anything other than a bit of time. And you know, it just makes your model look a lot better. As I say, if the fire extinguishers cover that hole, then don't worry. In fact, we can have a look now because I've got them here. We can have a look. Does that fire extinguisher cover that hole? It does kind of, but if you look down through the rear, you're going to see it. Okay, so you know, is it worth doing or not? Up to you guys. But that one there you're not going to cover with anything, so it's definitely worth doing. So that's that, and obviously I've got to rub down this area here. I've primed all the bits. Remember I was saying about this grey silver plastic makes everything look soft. You can see now when you look at the detail on that gearbox and transfer box, it all looks lovely. It's not very complete underneath. If you look at images of the real thing underneath, it's a lot more finicky than this, a lot more detailed. There's a lot lacking, but you know, it's underneath and it's going to get covered with a belly pan anyway, so you know, I don't know what I'm fussing about. And that's about it really. The intercooler looks great in primer. As I say, those seams are all done now, and the turbo's looking better the more I build it up in that area around the intake, so that's looking better. And there we go, engine block's done. I had a little mark here where I'd been doing some work, got rid of that. That's all primed. I've scribed those lines in again where I said where the head is split from the block. Okay, there's nothing there on the actual moulding itself. Not that you're going to see it because the engine cover is going to go on, but hey, it's there. And as I said before about the gearbox, trimming those bits off the gearbox and the transfer box, it just means you can get it together just like so. There we go. So we can put it together like that, okay, and we can still take it apart just like so. Just pull that over there, pull the engine out, there we go, and that means we can paint all this as one and paint all this as one without having to do any masking. It was this seam here that I wanted to get rid of. I've actually scribed a line in there to make it look like it's a join, because there is actually a join there. So all good. So let's just keep pushing on, and I'll come back when we've got some more work done. As we can see, this air box, all that seam work's come out lovely. No seam there at all. I've actually been using my Bart Sharp. Here it is. This is my Bart Sharp. Can't really call it now, but it's 50 quid from bartsharp.co.uk, and it comes with quick fittings. It comes with large, medium and small cup. This is the medium cup. It has a cap on it, so it's great for primer work. And it also comes with a 0.2, 0.3 and a 0.5 needle. And it's of course it's not as good quality as an Iwata. Of course it's not. A nozzle for my Iwata. Here's my Iwata here. The nozzle for the Iwata would cost more than this. Having said that, this thing it must be coming up 11 years old, 10 years old. I tell you what, we'll assume I bought this in 2011. Okay, so because I know what car I had at the time, and I only had the car for a couple of years. So let's assume it was 2011. It may have been 2010, but let's assume it's 2011. It's coming up to 11 years old. So, and I've never replaced a single part on it, and it's never let me down. Nothing has broken. No seals have gone. Nothing. With these, the cheaper, probably Asian airbrushes, you are going to get seals. You're going to, you know, they're not going to make something like that for 50 quid with special materials and stuff in it, it's gonna wear out faster than that one is. But at the moment I'm using it with primer. I'm going to actually try some gloss work with it because it puts the primer down so beautifully. If you look down here, I mean, it's satin smooth, it's lovely. This is Mr. Colour, not Mr. Colour, well it is Mr. Colour, it's Mr. Hobby. Mr. Hobby, Mr. Finishes Surfacer 1500 black, thinned 50/50. People ask me all the time, I think I may have mentioned this already, if I have I'll edit this out. People ask me all the time, what should I thin my Mr. Surfacer, what ratio and that. It's a question you can't answer because Mr. Surfacer 1000, if I can just show you, I think I've got a brand new pot here, scratch that. Here's Mr. Surfacer 1000, okay, so this is Mr. Surfacer 1000 that's been used a lot, and as you can see in there, it's fairly thick. Okay, this is Mr. Mahogany 1000, so it's basically the same. I'll give it a good shake. I wouldn't normally shake Mr. Surfacers because all the paint gets up around the lid and everything. I normally stir it, but I'll give it a good shake. That's the trouble, you see, when you shake it, it gets all around the lid, and then when you put it back on, it all congeals. But with Mr. Surfacer, unlike most paints, when it does congeal, get a knife, scrape it off and let it go back in the pot. It will dissolve into the paint. But you can see straight away the difference in the consistency of these two. If I do that, if I bring this grey one up to the edge, like that, okay, and I bring the brown one up to the edge and then I turn them back, you can see that that is a lot thicker than that. So if I said thin it 50/50, this one's going to come out nearly as thin as that one is now. So, you know, it's a bit of a, I can't ever say thin Mr. Surfacer 50% or whatever, because you just can't do it. In fact, in the summer, when it's really hot, if you live in a hot climate, you'll be using Mr. Surfacer, you have the jar open on the side, and literally 3 minutes and it's formed a skin. It dries out that fast. So every now and again it's a good idea to just come along, stick a drop of Mr. Colour Leveling Thinners in there and just let it you know, just let it sort of thin out and keep it thin. So that's what I do. What's this one here? Well, that's a Mr. Surfacer 1200. This one's pretty much unused. You can see how thin that is. That's like water. So, you know, you can't say, it's a question I can't answer. You ask me which one to use, can't answer it. So there we go. So right, I need to get some more painting done and get some sanding done on this back end and get that primed again, and we'll see how it looks. Okay, so looking at these brakes, first of all, what is all the fuss about? Right, the problem is the kit has two of these sprue C's. Okay, you can see this one here is the brake parts removed from here, and as you can see, you've got what have we got here? We've got 7, 8, 9 and 10. Okay, so you've got C7, C8, C9 and C10, and they go together to make up the brakes. And as we can see in the instructions, if you look at the rear brakes here, you can see they've got C7, C9, C7, C9, and what they've done, if you look at the way they're drawn, on this one, okay, on this one, you can see they've got the slots, the slots in the discs are facing that way, so they're going clockwise, if you like, okay, and then they've drawn this one, they're going that way. But because you've got two sprues the same, one side is the wrong direction. Now, if they hadn't put the slots in, it wouldn't matter. It depends how much of an accuracy nut you are. But the thing is, what determines the direction of a disc is the way the vanes are made. If the vanes are straight, the vanes are cast inside the discs. You can see here they're representing the vanes with these little nubbins. So if the vanes are cast straight, okay, then the discs are not directional, they can go on either side. If the vanes are cast, sometimes they're cast as like posts, individual posts instead of actual vanes, again, they're non-directional. If the vanes are cast like a fan, then the discs have to be fitted so that they pull cold air from the middle and push it out. if you put them on the wrong way, they will cool the inside of the brake and the outer will get hot. So what you want to do is pull air in the center and pull it out. That's why you'll see a lot of race cars have pipes facing air into the center of the disc, because the disc will pull the air out. The only time this rule changes, well, it doesn't change because if you've got vented discs, they're going to be made that way. But the actual slots in the disc, you can see here, these slots that are in the disc, they have to go so that if this was the outside of the disc here, and this is the driver's side of the car, the right hand side of the car, in the UK the driver's side, that is the direction it should be in going forward. Okay, so the outer part of the slot should hit the brake pad first. And I was trying to look up and see how it's described, and that's the way Brembo have described it. The outer end of the slot should hit the brake pad first. And then I found some other information that said they can be fitted the other way, and the terminology is passive and aggressive braking. I don't know what that means. But basically, Brembo say that with their discs, they should always be fitted so the slot is, that is like the right hand side of the car. These are both the right hand side of the car. That is how they should be fitted facing out. So obviously we've got the same discs on here. I've got these covered with tape. You may be able to just see the lines under there. But these discs, you can see they're the same. Okay, so they're molded the same because obviously they're the same from the same mold tool. So what we need to do is turn them round, so that what we get is, for the other side, we have the slots facing in the other direction. Now, if you're not worried about this, don't worry about it. Switch off, fast forward, whatever. If you want to do it and correct your model, then carry on and watch. What I was going to do was make a resin casting of these and then turn the outside off of one, drill the inside out of another, and then glue them together the other way round, and then basically take a mold off so I could make discs for the other side of the car. Now, I found an easier way to do it so that you could do this at home without having to use resin and stuff like that. And what I thought about doing was actually cutting the hub off and gluing the hub onto the other side, and that's the same as reversing the disc. Now obviously when we do this, we need to keep the center true when we cut it off. So here I've got a drill, I've wrapped it in some tape. This bore is roughly, it's all over the place, it's got a big lump in the middle of it. It's kind of shaped like that. But it's roughly 5.5 millimeters. So I've got a drill, 5mm drill, I've put some tape on it, so we've got a nice tight fit on there, so we can cut that off, and then when we want to put it back together the other way around, we'll put the drill through and that'll hold it in alignment. Now I'm fortunate I've got a lathe, so I've made up this little tool. This is the front brake and it's just a plain 5.5mm bore, and you'll see what I mean when I say it's got this lump in the middle. There we go. It sort of snaps on. You can see it's got a tiny bit of play in it now. You can see it's got a bit of play there, but it's tight in the middle. So it must mean I've got taper in my lathe actually. I must have a lump on the front of the lathe as well. So I've probably got that is tapered. Let me just have a quick look. I think my lathe is due for a service. Yeah, I've got 0.15, got 6 thou of taper in there, so that's no good. But it's good enough for this. So yeah, my lathe needs all the jib strips sorted and everything, so obviously that needs to be done. When you get that on a lathe, that's either the head is out, or you've got wear in the saddle, and as you turn, the tool is actually pulling itself into the material. So that's bad. That's really, really bad. 6 thou of that length is terrible. I'm going to have to sort that out. You should be able to see it when we hold it like that. So yeah, I'll sort that out. But basically, you just use a drill. You can have a straight line through there, and then you cut that off and you can glue it back together with it straight. The rear brakes are slightly different in they've got a smaller bore. You've got a 5.5mm bore here, and then a 3.8mm bore on the inside. You can see that smaller bore in there. So I've made this little step tool, and that just fits in just like that. So there we are. So I'm going to have to get out there tomorrow and sort that out. So I'm going to have oily hands again, guys. I'm not happy about that at all. I shouldn't have that sort of matter run out. Or taper, should I say. So what we're going to do is basically cut these off. So I've put this tape on the front. I've used my cheap plastic circle cutter. Someone said I called it a cheap plastic crap circle cutter, and someone said it's not crap if it works. It works, it's crap. Okay, So I've cut out some masking tape, put that on the front just to protect it, and then what we're going to do is cut this hub off, staying as flush to this disc face as we can. And then what we're going to do, I've already written down the dimensions. So the front brake is 7.5mm wide. Okay, so you can set 7.5, and the rear brake is 6.5mm. Okay, so what I'm going to do is cut that off, and obviously because we're going to use a blade, we're going to lose some material. So what I need to do is replace that material. So it just so happens I've got some circles. I'm scrap bin of plastic. So I've got some circles here which are from my scrap bin. I've got point 1, sorry, not 0.1, 0.25, 0.5, 0.75 and 1. So we've got those there ready to be used if we should need. Well, we're going to need them because the blade is going to remove some. So this is the the blade you normally see me using. This is the JLC saw and handle. Absolutely brilliant, absolutely fantastic tool. What I do with these, when I get a broken blade, I super glue it to this lump of plastic, and then I've got a saw that I can use. If you had to, say, cut lumps off the deck of a ship, you can use this saw to go in and cut the lumps off flush to the surface you're working on. And I can also use that on here. Okay, I could also use this saw, but I'm not sure it'd go all the way through. There's this saw here, which is the RB Production saw, so you could use this one as well. This is perfectly suitable for this. Just go round and just basically scrape away and just keep going round, and obviously hold it nice and flat against that tape because you don't want it to dig in. Or like I say, I can use this that I've made, just go round like so, making sure we stay nice and parallel. There we go. So we've cut that off now nice and flush. So all we've got to do is grab a sanding stick and sand that away. Oopsie daisy. Grab a marker. Make some marks on the tape. And then just sand away until we've sanded the pen marks off of the tape. Just like so. It's imperative you do this before you glue the other side on, because basically this is what you're going to be measuring. So you could also just put your sanding stick down and rub the disc like that, but basically we've got a bit of a larger area there, so I'm just going to concentrate in that area. In fact, it'd be quicker for the video just to lightly scrape some of that away. There we go. We're there now. Okay, so we can take the tape away. Just like so. Get rid of the tape. And then just for a quick check, few dabs of pen on there. And then just sand away the plastic. Just like so. And that's that done. Just going to brush out that dust, those holes, and that is that. So we've got our back face there. You can see where the blade is cut in very slightly into that face, but not going to worry about that. So now we've got to glue this onto this face, but keep it square. So I'm just going to sand the back of this off so it's nice and flat. And we should see that if we put this through here, there's the right face, and put that through there, that it keeps everything square. Okay? So now what we need to do is put them together and measure their width. You can see we've got 7.2. So we need to thicken it up a bit. So we need, that's 0.25, that'll give us 7.45. So let's go for the 0.5, this is the 0.5, and then we can sand it back to get to the right size we want. So we can just glue that on there and then we're away. Okay, so now we've got our disc cut out. It's just a case of holding that together and gluing it on. And there we go. Now these brakes I don't think are very accurate at all. They would have had separate bells, I think. And these look like just simple hubs, but one of the beauties of this model is because of the design of the wheels you can't really see much of the brakes anyway. So as I say, if you're not a bloody idiot like me, then you might not want to bother with doing this, but you know, it's just adds to the fun, doesn't it? And I know that you guys like to see me modifying kits and stuff rather than just sticking bits of plastic together. So that's glued on there now, so we can measure that. That's 4.8. A little bit of a run on there. When we put it on here, we should have more than 7.5, and we have. So we've got a bit to sand off of there. So I'm going to let that glue dry, then I'll sand around the outside edges, get that all nice and cleaned up, draw through the centre, and then we'll look at sanding it down and getting it nice and parallel. Alright, so there we go. So done that. I've sanded that down to size now. So that is now 4.68, 4.5, no, it wasn't 4.68, 4.63, 4.62, 4.64, 4.6. So that's a nice, fairly parallel, should I say. So now this one, got some oil on there, I think, so I'm going to get that off now before it spreads. Okay. One of my crappy old cotton buds, not one of my nice new ones from Simon. And just get that off. Just quickly check this one over as well. Obviously I've used them to size the material on the lathe. But, okay, so that's that done. Now when I put this on here, hold it roughly in the centre and measure. I'm looking for 7.5, I've got 7.55. Check it across the other way. It's just over, so I'll just take a touch more off. Just a little tiny touch on there. There we go, 7.5. You can see that on there, 7.49, 7.5. So all I can do is take my jig, like so, and slip that onto there. It's got so much taper in it that it's not going to do as good a job. The only difference is here I can hold it together square. So what I could do, I'm just going to put a piece of tape around here to take up that taper. It won't be a minute. Okay, so I've put a piece of tape around there. Just shows how bad the lathe is, blimey. So that goes on that way. So that's going to be the inside face. So that'll sit on there like that. And then this outer hub will go on here, like so. Okay, and then take some extra. I'm going to use ordinary extra thin because I want a stronger bond and I want it to penetrate rather than just go in there and just glue it straight away. So we get plenty in there, nice and wet. And then push the two together. And the beauty of having this tool rather than using a drill is I've got the square face to push back onto. So that's handy. If you don't have the tool, I would suggest putting the drill in the other way round and then put the disc down and press down on it with it on the bench. But, I think the bits that go in here are these here, these parts here, and I think they're going to be like a prick in the top out anyway. I mean, I know that that's 5.45 and that's 5, so we've got 0.45 clearance in there, so having it dead true doesn't really matter at all. It's just a case of when it turns, is it going to rub on the brake caliper? So that's that one done. So now you can see we have, this is that part there, and now you can see that I now have the grooves in the disc going the other way around. So we've now got correctly handed front discs. Now we just got to do the back. So I'll repeat that on here and then I'll be back. Right, that's the rear one done. So I've cut it off, made up a disc, put it on the back. Remember, this one needs to be 6.45. So look at that, straight in. So the other thing to remember, this one, make a bigger hole in the disc before you fit it to the hub, because this one's got the counter bore in the back of it, and that has to be from the back face of the disc to the back of that counter bore is 3.5 millimeters. So you need to make sure you have 3.5, 3.43, that will do. So just make sure you've got enough there to give you the clearance, but I think it's going to clamp up when you do the wheel up. I think it's going to clamp it all up. So I'm going to use this little jig I made. You could easily do this with some brass tube or step rod or whatever. So I was going to glue it back together the wrong way then. Look, be careful, Nige. That's going to go on there, and then that one's going to go on there, and I've got a piece of plastic swarf in there I've just seen. So just get that out. Get out. What I've done, I forgot to cut the hole, so I had to cut the hole after I'd done it. So that's going to go together like that. I'm just going to check, just with a magic marker, just go around and check the sanding on the disc there, because obviously it's going to be very difficult to get into it once you've got the hub mounted to the disc. Let's just check it's all nice and flush and square. There we go, and I wouldn't use a sponge for this, I'd use a hard disc, otherwise what you'll do is round off the corners. There we go, all done. There we are, so that's going to go on there like so. Then we can hold that together. In fact, I won't hold it together initially, I'll hold it apart so that I can get some glue to capillary into the joint. Plenty in there, nice weld action on there, and then squeeze it down. And there we go, we've made a pair of discs for the, what's that, for the left hand side. So that, my friends, is that. So you can see now when you look at this one, this is the one with the counter bore, this is the rear disc. So you can see now that one's going in the opposite direction with the vanes in the opposite direction. So there we go. All done. And if you care as much about things like that as I do, then do it. If you don't worry about it. I wouldn't worry about it at all. There'll probably be a photo etch set come along for this, and it'll have photo etch discs to go on there to correct it anyway, so it looks right. But there we go. Remember, according to Brembo, the slot should hit the pad at the outside first. So they actually cut into the pad rather than, if it's going that way, okay, the inside of the, if we've got the groove in there like that, you can see the groove here is running up there. If it was turning this way, the bottom of the, if this was the brake pad, the bottom would hit the brake pad first. So what you do is have the brake pad on this side, yeah, and as it's going round, the top of the groove hits the brake pad first, as you can see there. Okay, so that's what we're going for. Right, so I'll leave those to dry, and then I will carry on with something else. Right, so just to close this part 2 video out, the exhaust here, it glues together. It has to go in earlier, it has to go in before the rear suspension, because the rear suspension sits above it. So basically I've glued it all together. There's a seam here, you can just see the seam under there. It's had super glue and Mr. Surfacer on it. I glued it first together with the glue for weld action, then went over some super glue as like a filler and to help it bond, and then finished off with Mr. Surfacer. I never use super glue on its own if I can help it. And then the tailpipe here is a separate piece, and that's so they can have the hollowed end on it. And basically I've gone round there with a little burr and just thinned out the plastic to get a nice thin edge on that pipe. And then what is nice about it is the actual pipe, this tailpipe, is larger than the exhaust, but it should all be blended. It should be the same diameter all the way down. So what I've done, again, I went around with some super glue, then some Mr. Surfacer, and then you can just go around with your magic marker and just put a magic marker on, you know, just like this. Just put a magic marker line around like that, and then using a hard sander first, okay, just to get the step away, like that, and then come in with a sponge and just polish off to keep everything nice and round, and you've got like a compound curve there. Look. So and that's the way to blend all that in, and you can't see a seam there at all. You can see a line there where it was joined, but when you turn it over, there's nothing there. So that's just going to fit in there lovely. I think I already mentioned about plugging these holes here in the floor. Done some more work around this area here that I did some work on before. Prop shaft, ejector pin marks in the prop shaft. If you want to get rid of them, now's the time to do it, because that's going to get glued in. And I've obviously got that off the sprue because I wanted to cut that pin off, or cut it shorter, so that I could plug that hole in the floor there. And then the exhaust will just sit in into there and into there, like that. Okay, and then if it doesn't line up perfectly with the turbo, all we'll do is warm this up and then just bend it and flex it about and make it fit. But obviously it fits nicely between the mount there, the mount there, and the mount there, so we'll keep it like that. The other thing I noticed was part of the floor would be these brackets. These brackets are here, they're parts 21 and 22C, and you can see that they go in here, and then you've got some trailing arms going to them. They're basically putting that one through these two brackets, and then they're saying heat the end with a screwdriver. I think I'll probably punch out a couple of discs and glue them on rather than heat it with a screwdriver. But what I wanted to do was get these glued in nice and solid now, because basically they're going to fit into the floor like so. And obviously on the real thing they would have been part of the body shell and welded on. So there they are. There's one there fitted. Okay. These are some of the worst moulding I've ever seen. As you can see in here, you've got a great big pin and hole that's helping them locate together. So on this one you can see I've cut that out to tidy it up, make it look a lot nicer. What I did, glued these together, clamped them, I put a 1.2mm drill through the two holes, and then held it square, because when you look at the state of the mould, and if you look at the bottom of that, it's disgusting. It's not flat in either direction. You can see two bloody great steps on the ends, so that should be flat. So this one here I've cleaned up and got it nice and flat, and you can see the difference in those two. So all I've done is come along with a knife initially and just trimmed away these bloody great big lumps of over molded plastic, which are horrible, just to kind of try and get it flat and square and everything, and then just go from there. And then this in here, we can just come in there with a knife and cut down there, cut down that side, and then we can just with the knife just cut around and basically just get it all to come out really. Just do a little bit at a time and just get it all cleaned out. Get rid of that great big horrible lump. Just like so. And there we go, you can see that's got rid of that horrible lumps. That's one eyesore gone. And then you've got when you can see across the top here, that's supposed to be flat. You can see that it's not, so you just sand that to get it flat. There's a radius on there, and then sand the back. Get that nice and flat. Then we get some Mr. Surfacer on there, sand the front, get that nice and flat. The whole thing is like, it's all like a wedge. It's horrible. It's a proper mess. In fact, they're the worst parts I've come across in this kit so far. They're like something you'd expect to find out of a 1980s Rodin kit, you know. So there we go. So that's that flat, and that should fit in there a lot nicer now. They're not handed, they will go in either side. So that little leg's going to go in there. There we are. So that's going to sit in there now, nice and flat and square, rather than all over the place like it was before. So I need to get some filler in there and fill those seams. You know, those horrible seams on the end there, you can see, and do some more tidy up on the inside. Got my little Infini PE sander here, which is perfect for getting in there. Get in there and sand all that horrible seam away inside. I did actually say, as I said, I ran some super glue inside. One to sort of lock it together while it was curing, and two to help get rid of that seam. If we go in and keep the knife at an angle, you won't be able to scrape that away. I just keep the knife at an angle so it doesn't go into the seam. A bit of an ejector pin mark there, ejector pin mark there. They really are bad, these bits, they are awful. Proper like an afterthought bit, you know. And then if you've got these Matador sanders, they fit in there perfectly as well for sanding out the sides. There we go, so I'll do a bit more clean up on them, get some Mr. Surfacer on them, and then I'll get them glued into the floor. And then we'll call that a day for this one. I've had an idea with the steering. What I think I'm going to do is fill this hole with a plastic disc, and then put a magnet in the centre of there. And you can see we've got this ring in here, which locates the top of the strut. So I was thinking, if I cut you haven't seen it yet, but I've done it on a GT40. I put a chrome rod into the strut rather than have a plastic rod, and then that'll be steel. And then what we'll do is just have it flush with the top, and then just have the magnet holding the top in, so when you pick the car up, the suspension doesn't fall out, but it'll get rid of those horrible pins and C-clip things coming through into the engine bay. So that'll be good. And we may find we've got too much or not enough caster, because obviously that nut there, that is the centre of the strut coming through, and for some reason they've decided to move the strut to over there. So yeah, it's horrible. So it may be that it has to come back. So we'll see what the wheel is like in the wheel arch. If it's too far forward, we may have to do some different surgery. What I really need to do with this thing is get everything off the sprues and dry build it, because I'm doing so much work I might run into a big problem soon, as you'll see. But I don't think I've hit any so far. I've been checking that the engine will go in with everything else fitted in that. So anyway, I'm going to get those sorted out, and then I'll get them glued in, and I'll see you next time for more of these mods videos. It's not, as I say, it's not a video build, it's mods videos, just basically on this kit. So thanks for watching. I'll see you all soon, and as I say, keep your eye out for part 3, which will be coming your way. Bye for now.